guest is Anastasia Samoylova. Welcome. Also published by Steidl. Um, she is based in Miami, but Russian, so probably quite a change of scenario. And she moves between observational photography and studio practice. She's going to have a show in 2020 of her book, of her series, Float Zone, at USF Contemporary Art Museum in Tampa and the Wilhelm Hack Museum in Germany as part of a Biennale. And so I was looking at the project, and I was very intrigued by the way that such a kind of apocalyptic subject matter was treated with lyricism, if I may say. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the project in general, how you were fascinated by that subject and the decision behind the book.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Here's the slideshow, some spreads from the book. The project started when I moved to Miami from Midwest in the States. So I moved to Miami in 2016, and it was the hottest summer on record. So as somebody who comes from a Nordic climate, it was Moscow my whole life, and in my 20s I moved to Chicago area for education. I was really not aware, climate change for me was associated with imagery like polar bears and melting ice caps. This was sort of on the back of my mind when I moved, and my first-hand experience was different from that. So it's been 3 years in Miami now, and 3 hurricanes for me, including Category 4, Hurricane Irma in 2017, that affected me really personally. I live in Miami Beach, which is an artificial island. Maybe some of you have been. And we could not evacuate, so my family could not evacuate. I was stuck there with my son. There was no gas anywhere in town, so we couldn't really leave. And responding to that, how climate change is experienced on a daily basis. So the sort of little signifiers, the everyday life, the mold, the humidity. Most of these photographs are taken in, 35-degree heat and above. This is now a series of road trips that's included in this book. So it's more than Miami. It's Florida, there's South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana. So it's sort of a conglomerate of southern states. And I took my time. The first year was really just trying to process where I was through the lens. So it was observational walks every day. I photographed a lot. And so out of that material, they formed some vectors. There's flora, there's fauna, there's architecture.
Very fluid. Water is like...
And water is
even
everywhere.
Even if it's not maybe all the time in the picture, you can feel it.
Exactly. I'm glad you bring it up. This is a voodoo ritual, one of my favorites. It's a chicken head cut off. It's a santeria. Miami has a big Cuban and Haitian population. So just responding to what's in front of me and steering clear of cliches or any kind of sensationalism, disaster reportage. I was not interested in that. I wanted to show the complexity of the subject, the layering, and the perpetual, dichotomy between sort of the facade, the surface of things, and the reality that's beneath it. There was all these billboards, there are construction billboards throughout the city that promise an even more beautiful life, and yet in the cracks, you see flooded foundations and rusting scaffolding. So it's those contrasts that I wanted to show.
And is this your first book?
Yes, it is my first book.
And it's your first book.
It just arrived yesterday.
Steidl. I mean, it's quite an achievement.
I know, I can't believe it.
So I was wondering how you worked in terms of composing the book, and how was the relationship with Steidl, if it was similar to what Massimo just told us, or if you had a different experience, what would be your advice to a newcomer into the photo book scene?
I think taking it slow is important. So this is a project of 3 years. First year, it was just really figuring out my way around the subject and trying not to repeat what someone else has done, making it personal. About 2.5 years into it, I realized I have the project and that I'm not capable of editing it myself. So I tried, it took many months, and I felt like I was failing, and it's a different art form, editing. So I outsourced my editing to the brilliant David Campany, who also wrote the essay for the book. And David made some radical decisions, like this was a horizontal picture, for instance, so this is chopped in half. And I thought, you know, how far can I push my limits as a photographer? And it's far, it turns out. So I gave him sort of carte blanche, and I trusted him fully with the edit. And the majority of them retain my original format, but some of them have been cropped, and it's a really interesting collaboration. And with Gerhard Steidl, he approved of the edit right away when we sent the PDF. So then it was a matter of printing, and again, I trusted Gerhard fully with printing. So
I guess you can.
yeah, I brought my own color proofs. I have no assistants, so I print myself. I'm very particular about color. I do my own proofs on the printer, and I brought them all the way with me from Miami. Just gave him a stack, and they reproduced them verbatim. So I had no issues with color. It's perfect reproduction.
Because it's very tropical as well, your
The palette.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a contrast, you know, the tropicalness, right? The pinks and the turquoise was brought into Miami to continue to market it as a place that's safe for tourism and further development, you know, those condo buildings. But in reality, it's very swampy. It's sort of subdued greens and mustard yellows. It's good. It's like this shimmery swamp. That's the land. And then pink is imposed.
And just because you mentioned the traumatic experience that you had yourself personally with the hurricane, I was wondering if making this project had some sort of cathartic, therapeutical effect, or not, and what's your feeling now when you think back at that traumatic event after this experience of making the book?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, cathartic is the word. The book feels like closure, but I'm continuing with the project. Of course, it's an issue that affects so many areas. I'm traveling up the East Coast next, and of course the Caribbean is another area I'm interested in. The project is deeply felt for me, so there are layers of feelings there and emotions. There is irony as well, you know, as a coping mechanism for me. So there's billboards and sort of trompe-l'oeil elements. Some things are quite absurd, you know, and the whole denial of climate change and how quickly it's happening. Yeah, so that's why I think I wanted to vary my approaches. So you see some epic aerial shots. This is me on the helicopter, you know, without a door, and then some close-up elements of just from my daily walks and observing. And some of those came out of editorial assignments from smart editors who knew of my interests and sent me on relevant subjects. Mm-hmm.
And do you think you're going to continue with this subject matter?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm always working. So I just came back from, well, Virginia. I was in Tangier Island. So I'm photographing up East Coast now, and I'm exploring Netherlands, where I will also have a show actually in February. So that just got formed, this work.
Do you think, in terms of long term, do you think that this is the first of a series of books?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So this is the southern states, and there will be more iterations as I go.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to ask the public if they have any questions for Anastasia. Okay. We have time just for two, so let's keep it to those two ladies.
Hi, I have a question. In your work, it's mostly you shoot the environment, but not the people. It's you choose to shoot that on purpose, or yeah.
Good question. There are some people there. When I walk, it's almost like my vision switches to just my thinking switches to visual. You maybe notice my compositions are quite careful. My background in Russia was in architecture, so I'm very careful about my structure within the shot. I get so focused and so in my element. It's a very solitary experience for me, quite meditative, this walks. But people do approach me, interestingly. People approach me and tell their stories. I get often approached by residents, in these flooded areas. And I started recording those stories, so I think the next iteration will have some stories from people and more portraiture. Yeah.
Thanks. And the second question?
First, congrats for your work, and the project is amazing. I know a lot Miami. I'm from Brazil, so
Oh, great.
yeah. My question is very simple because I have problems to do my proofs in-house. What kind of printer you have?
I have Epson P8000.
Thank you very much. You do with cotton paper, the proofs or not?
Pardon me?
Cotton paper? You
I
do
use the Epson paper
paper normal.
for proofs. I like it.
Thank you.
Sure.
And on this very technical note, we would like to thank you so much for being with us. Sorry, it's very short, but that's the format of the talks. And the book signing is?
Next, at 4 p.m. on Steidl. We're
Perfect.
signing this, and I'm not partying with my colleagues.
Thank you very much.